Resident Evil Code Veronica was seen as a hallmark for many fans of the series. While the formula didn't really improve here, this game remained popular for 20 plus years after its initial conception. Resident Evil fans who grew up with this iteration seem to be livid at the notion that Capcom has fully neglected this horror masterpiece. It hasn't been a talking point since the HD remaster of the original that came out well during the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 era. You can say that this remaster still sits in a void, dead and waiting to see the light of day yet again on the Steam store. This goes hand in hand with the idea that Resident Evil 4 is slowly becoming the teacher's pet with a new remake. With the crack and the sizzle, we witnessed some mental exhaustion during the most recent state of play. There's always been this aura, this uncertain future in regards to the idea of Capcom not obliging ideas from the community. After all, fans express their voice loudly with civil discourse and constant petitions. There even exists a fan remake which Capcom has not DMCA'd yet. I don't know why, but it's still up. This begs the question of why. Is there some type of personal vendetta against this game? Should you feel worried? What kind of corporate sabotage are we talking about here? What's happening underneath the hood? Let's get into some positives to rest your anxiety just a little bit. I really don't think that Code Veronica X is the greatest Resident Evil game ever made. Hell, I've scolded many of its shortcomings in my review. I cited things like difficulty spikes, vapid backtracking, and the regression of gameplay mechanics when you compare it to Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. However, I do think that there is some benefits that could be reawakened yet again. Just think about it for a second, right? Every little problem that I just named could be fixed in a nanosecond. Vanished, boof, like a ghost. Just get the right talent in there and all these problems centered around Chris and Claire sharing the same inventory space could be solemnly resolved. There's also not a bad story set up here as well, from Alexia Ashford being a force to be reckoned with to Albert Wesker's return. There's a lot that happens in this story that bubbles up to the surface in dramatic tension. This is one of the things that I really appreciated in Code Veronica X. It felt like a story that was picking up the pieces, picking up the stakes yet again with the characters who really mattered. It felt like a perfect continuation to the events established within Resident Evil 1 and 2. Claire trying to find her lost brother, who in turn has to save her from a diabolical family. There's a lot of blood-gushing moments of lore that cuts deep with emotional turmoil, not to mention that the tragedy of Steve Burnside can be conveyed better with far better voice acting these days, unless you want something equivalent to this?
Father!
I'm Claire Redfield.
Damn, girl. You scared me.
Eyes forward. So, what's your name?
My name's Steve.
Not to mention that the difficulty could be far more balanced if they decided to do a remake of Resident Evil Code Veronica. Imagine the plethora of choices like Inferno, Hardcore, Normal, or Assisted modes, so the player knows exactly what they're in for. Now the part you're wondering about. We're going to talk about the million-dollar question. Why does Capcom neglect Resident Evil Code Veronica like a redheaded stepchild? Come on, I mean, from my perspective, this obviously boils down to money being part of the puzzle to deal with. The truth hurts. No, think about it. The truth really hurts. The truth is, Code Veronica was always under par on sales due to its inception on the Sega Dreamcast. Long story short, the PlayStation 2 completely eradicated any longevity that the Sega Dreamcast had to offer. I personally think this was the reason why initial Dreamcast sales fell short of 1.14 million copies. When you compare that to any lone entry in the series, it's abysmal. Shinji Mikami's vision for a world of Resident Evil outside of the PlayStation immediately regressed right back to Sony's black box in 2001. A re-release version of Code Veronica called Code Veronica X was revamped for the PlayStation 2. Under the hood, it seemed like an apt apology with never before seen cutscenes and changed story events that were only exclusive to this version of the game. In hindsight, it was an effort to squeeze this blood diamond to death for massive revenue. Code Veronica would eventually reach lifetime sales with over 3 million copies sold worldwide, breaking Resident Evil 4's record in 2006. You would figure that Shinji Mikami's pet project was promptly dethroned by that logic, but no, the popularity factor just decided to keep knocking everyone into the dirt. Remember that the hype for Resident Evil 4 was upon unprecedented levels. RE4 is largely seen as the second reinvention for the series that completely fostered the over-the-shoulder genre. Lightning was struck from the heavens, contained in Capcom's pocket for some damn safekeeping. Their take on the third-person shooting genre was like a grand conception for other developers to keep pinching off their ideas. It's not the first time that this happened in gaming history if we take Grand Theft Auto 3 into account, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. Regardless, Resident Evil 4 grew like a festering tree branch amongst the gaming stratosphere. The Last of Us, Gears of War, Uncharted, and Mass Effect all had this popularized over-the-shoulder camera angle in play. Code Veronica really didn't do anything that significant from a gameplay perspective, at least not to the point where you would consider it as genre defining. Nothing was reinvented or altered in a grandiose fashion for the gameplay. If you played Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3, then you practically experienced what Code Veronica had to offer. You're mostly in the driver's seat for the cinematic batshit spectacle that is provided by the plot details. I will be fair and say that Resident Evil 4 doesn't have that connective story tissue. It felt so standalone to the entire timeline that it just felt so foreign as rural Spain could be. However, Resident Evil 4 was so revered that it impacted gaming significantly. I think because the fanfare was so positive, it was clearly easy pickings for Capcom, which prompted the green light. We have a multi-million-dollar beast that is in such high demand that other developers wanted a piece. It's sad but true. Capcom will always be a business first and foremost. Game selection is solely dictated by the owners of the intellectual property versus fan feedback. Feedback creates a digital footprint on need, not desire. Every company has a clear metric involving careful planning and analysis. It's a no-brainer that the remake that was chosen after the first would be Resident Evil 2. Resident Evil 2 was hailed by many as the first step into Resident Evil becoming a franchise. 4 was the gameplay evolution in the same breath. Therefore, Code Veronica X would actually be the underdog, the underrated relic compared to Resident Evil 4's popularity. Popularity is a metric as well, people. It keeps food on the table at night, just in case you didn't know. Rumors from Dust Golem said that Resident Evil 4 Remake was in development at the same time as Resident Evil 2. I believe it because Dev 1 probably had their picks well in advance for this long-term operation. Will we take two beloved games, and if so, what is the outcome? Resident Evil 3 just paid the price with too many cooks spilling hot water on the floor. What was it, like 4 or 5 developers working on one title? Jesus Christ. The asset flips probably provided a large assistance involving content creation with this one. Resident Evil 2 Remake assets easily went into Resident Evil 3 Remake. Then we counterbalanced that with Village. Resident Evil Village probably gave the team a great viewpoint from textures, art, performance, and fidelity. Village was the first Resident Evil game that graced the PlayStation 5, so that architecture came in handy for the Resident Evil 4 Remake team. I don't see anything wrong with reused assets until it starts to feel repetitive or affect the story. The good news is that Capcom will have a clean slate when choosing remakes after this game. You should not be too pissed, you should not be too angry. These critiques about Resident Evil 3 Remake certainly didn't fall on deaf ears with the high omissions taken. The money from Resident Evil 4 Remake will be promptly used for remakes going forward in the future. I am positive that this money will define upcoming Resident Evil titles immensely. There's only so much from the mainline canon in order to craft up a hefty remake in the first place. I'm sure the options are going to start to exhaust, and Capcom will have to pay attention to later games in the franchise that they haven't remade yet. Code Veronica being one of those things. It's a temporary sweep under the rug with this one, no more, no less, but you have to wait even longer for your desires to be delivered. Considering that, well, the reimagined aspect, okay, maybe you wouldn't be happy regardless, right? Whenever Capcom decides to say that Resident Evil Code Veronica Remake will fall under the same reimagined vein, then people are going to go berserk anyway regardless. I mean, again, if the cut content isn't too bad like Resident Evil 2 Remake for example, then maybe you should take a chill pill, okay? Let's be clear, sometimes fans do not know what they want. I would suggest slicing off the random tendon as well that is quoted about unnecessary remakes. Look, in my opinion, all art is necessary, whether you love it, hate it, or feel indifferent. It entices discussion. It makes content for content creators. Your favorite game from 20 years ago has probably aged worse than rotten eggs. Resident Evil 4 can be updated for the modern masses, so it's baffling when people say otherwise. I still can't walk and shoot at the same time within the original Resident Evil 4. It's still a great game, just we kind of move past that in terms of upgrading mechanics when you move forward into the series. Making it a horror experience through and through is also something I didn't fathom in my wildest imagination. That's just a gigantic callback towards everything they tried doing in Resident Evil 3.5. They have a chance in making this game something truly magnificent. If you still don't like what you see, then I suppose that nothing will ever convince you otherwise. We will get Resident Evil Code Veronica reawakened yet again. It's just a matter of when, where, and how. All I know is Resident Evil's future couldn't look any brighter when you start to think about all the fantastic things that are shaping up for the optimistic fan base, whether it's past, present, future, or revisiting anything in a reimagined setting. We just want it all done properly as fans. If Capcom can learn from their mistakes, then I think we can learn as fans that Code Veronica is still on the horizon. The journey will just take a little bit longer as we keep our eyes on the prize. Chris and Claire will be reunited in the modern era, and it will be fantastic. Have some faith, speak on it, keep up the civil discourse, and we'll get there, no problem. This is Renegade Operative signing off. Hopefully you guys really enjoyed this video about my thoughts on why there hasn't been any sort of green light on Resident Evil Code Veronica as a remake. Hopefully you slap that like button, comment below, and tell me what you think of the video, what you think of Code Veronica not getting a remake, what you think of Resident Evil 4 getting a remake and the footage that they showed. Let me know, hit that bell notification, subscribe, and I will see you guys next time for more horror goodness. This is Renegade Operative signing out. Take care of yourselves, and once again, later.